is Vince Houghton. I'm the historian and curator here at the International Spy Museum. We'd like to welcome you all here tonight. We always enjoy partnering with the naval intelligence professionals. We've been doing this now for quite some time. And it seems a great symbiotic relationship to have programs here like this with speakers as exceptional as we're going to have tonight. We do a lot of other programming here. If you've never been to one of our events here at the museum, check us out. On the back table, we have both the rest of what's happening in the spring and what's happening in the summer here at the Spy Museum. Lots of events, about one a week we do here at the museum. Definitely worthwhile and worth checking out. If you forget, you can always look on our website, spymuseum.org, to see what we have coming up into the future. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time because we want to save as much as we can for our speaker tonight. So let me introduce the person who's going to introduce our speaker tonight. She's Terry from the Naval Intelligence Professionals, who we've always enjoyed working with in the past. We appreciate you taking the time to come again here tonight.
Thanks. And you have a new building.
We are, yes. So in March of next year, we'll be moving into our new building just on the other side of the National Mall, L'Enfant Plaza. You've probably driven by it and didn't know it was ours. Bunch of brutalist architecture buildings like the Hoover Building. In the middle of it is a big glass building that looks like it doesn't belong, and that's ours. Yeah, so
very cool. Congratulations.
Yes, thank you so much.
As Vince said, I'm Terry Wilton. I'm the Executive Director of Naval Intelligence Professionals, and that's why I can write to represent NIP. This actually is a NIP Capital Chapter event. Our local chapters worked hard to make this happen. Terry Roberts and I have known each other since 1982. We are both lieutenants in Naval Intelligence. Yes, sorry. Yeah. Right. Very junior lieutenants. She retired as the Deputy Director of Naval Intelligence, so she definitely knows a little bit about the subject. And she's been very much in the cyber industry and digital things ever since. She's kind of the expert in the field within the Naval Intelligence community. So, Terry?
Thanks.
Take it away.
Appreciate it. Okay, you all get a bonus point for being out here on a school night. And we are conveniently located from the refreshments across the street. So afterwards, anyone who wants to join us for a beverage and to continue the conversation, we can head over there. I'd like to keep this very seminar-like. So we're not going to just leave questions till the end. I've been thinking and writing and speaking about this subject for about the last 3 years. And then I find it ironic, right, the last 6 months or year where it's really, been in the news. But it was pretty obvious to me because I have a dichotomy in myself that probably a lot of you have, which is I have a public-facing self, that I've sort of had since I was a Navy captain, and then went to the senior executive service, and then head of an institute at Carnegie Mellon, and then in industry, and now with my own company. You have to, have that outward, part of you. And then I am extraordinarily private, in my personal life. I think maybe there's that, okay, I have this over here, and then I want to be very private. So I'm always got that. I think I'm the perfect person to talk about privacy and security because I live both. So I'll give you the example. I've never had a Facebook account. And for all the reasons we're going to discuss, as a national security professional, I just had absolutely no desire to put any part of my personal life out there. I'm also old, so that makes a difference. But as we all know, and I actually have a speech on social media security, which is ironic since I don't use it, which is you really shouldn't put children out in social media because 90% of all kidnappings and molestations today start with information that they get from social media. And an important part of this is thinking like a bad guy, right? And so those of us who come from a national security background, I can't help it. I'm always thinking like a bad guy, and I just think, oh my God, if all the information is right there for me, and all I have to do is do a little jury rigging to get that information, hey, I'm going to do that. So that's, right, we've got that yin and yang of the beauty and amazing power of the internet and wireless devices and data analytics and AI and machine learning. And then we have the other side of it. So that's what I'd kind of like to explore with you and a little bit of my thinking. So I did start a LinkedIn account a year ago because of my company, and my millennials who work with me and for me were like, you know, really, it's about time. So I do have a LinkedIn account. But what I try to do with my LinkedIn account is keep it, and you can, keep it very professional, and I do thought leadership, right, about what's going on, and very little even personally about the company or, you know, personally about myself. So I'm still definitely at arm's length. So what I'd like to do is go through a logic train that I've put together. And then I continually add to it and iterate on it. Okay, let me, oh, yeah, okay, there we go. So what I like to talk about is there's been a progression, right, that has occurred in the high-profile attacks of pretty much the past 5 or 6 years. It started, right, with Target, Home Depot, JP Morgan. And that type, but we have to think of the type of data sets, right? And remember, this is criminal activity, right? The criminals have moved from the physical world to the virtual world. Why? Because, why? So much easier. So remember the 3 things you always need to have. You need to have capability, opportunity, and intention. And those things are pretty easy to align in the digital world. And so it's much, and there's an added bonus of anonymity, right? Gaining attribution of an online criminal, unless you're really slappy, is actually pretty difficult. So much harder to build a case, much harder to prosecute. So the advantage wholeheartedly is with the criminal who has those 3 things aligned. Therefore, and I want to say, I actually sort of saw it happening in 2013, between 2013 and 2014, the hackers who had been primarily nation state and high-end hackers had been going after the financial institutions and governments, right? And espionage, right? There's always espionage. And then there was this bow wave shift that started happening. And low-level criminals started coming in, and mid-level criminals started coming in. And they started attacking all industries, right? So this is the dynamic that we were seeing. But what also is happening is different types of information were being targeted. So with Anthem, it was the first time that there were personal health profiles, 78 million that were stolen. With Adult Friend Finder in 2016, more than 412 million accounts. Sony, I remember my son was one of them. All the IP movies accounts, and then the major Sony event, right? So there was the Sony PlayStation, and then what? North Korea, right? Attacked Sony itself. And that was really interesting because they actually froze all 35,000 computers. So it was both a malware attack and a data attack. Panama Papers, different kinds of information. Oh, important thing about the Sony movie hack was here you have this amazing company, large company who had a CIO, who had a cybersecurity professional, and their unreleased movies, the revenue of the source of the revenue of their business weren't encrypted. Were connected to the network openly, okay? Panama Papers, interesting insider, issue, but also while a lot of bad guys were caught, a lot of good guys were, caught up in it because it just, who happened to be your attorney, and then all your attorney-client privilege is being sold on the dark web, okay? So that was a different spin. Yahoo is actually the biggest with 3 billion user accounts. Luckily, it was the user accounts with that service, and unless you use the same password, it wouldn't have affected your other accounts. The really bad thing was the delay in notification, right? What helps all of us is if you have the notification sooner rather than later, then you know that you need to take action, and then the damage is minimized. The Paradise Papers in November 2017, 13 million confidential files leaked from a legal firm, Appleby. And then Equifax. Hey, if there's anyone in this room who wasn't impacted by Equifax, I'll be surprised. Some of us, a couple of different ways. And that was interesting because basic protocols weren't being used. And so again, a lower level criminal could do it because we're not locking our windows and doors, we're not putting the jewels in a safe, we're not listening to the neighborhood watch, we're not treating the virtual world like we do the physical world. We've put it in a different category and said, I'll get to it later, kind of thing. And then Uber, 57 million users and 600,000 drivers exposed. Okay. So then we've had an interesting twist that's happened recently, right? So this is the first, before it was your financial data, your health data, your legal personal data being stolen for the most part and either exploited or sold on the dark web. So an identity on the dark web, anywhere between $10 to $20 per identity, okay? So if you steal $1 million, it can be pretty darn lucrative, okay? The difference with this was the business model of some of the companies that we know and love and trust is that we get a free service for them to be able to have some of our data, right? And it's not seen as insidious because it's data that you're putting out there openly. It's normally not personally identifiable information in like your Social Security number or your checkbook number, but it is an accumulation of data about yourself to include sometimes your location and the one I really hate, to include your contacts, okay? So I did not open up my contacts to LinkedIn, but do I feel that that somehow they can't get them? This kind of shakes all of us, right? To think when you have to go through all the permissions, when you have to go through all the documentation, the onus is on the consumer as opposed to the onus being on the company. The one with, the recent one, I guess the last couple of weeks that really got me was this capture of the Golden State Killer, and that the fact that they had gone to an open DNA data set. So they didn't need, the law enforcement did not need probable cause because it was an open it would, by design, the company had it that way, okay? Now, this is a case where something good, right, comes of it. You're actually able to capture a criminal as a result of those data sets and that analysis. But I'm wondering how many people knew, right, when they were becoming a part of that company, that it was an open data set, okay? And hey, there's a bunch of us that have had our identity stolen in different ways. And so, you know, I'll get into that in a moment. Okay. So what we're trying to do is set up the different paradigms that are building as a part of the digital age. So just to sort of show, the data breaches is the blue line, and the millions of records exposed. But remember, these are singular events, and so there's this cumulative, right, effect that this isn't showing, okay? And what is important to see is that the cybersecurity, and actually I'm more of a cyber intelligence person, but the cybersecurity community is not helping us the way we need them to help us. But I would actually turn it around. I don't think as consumers we're demanding security of the companies that we buy from or the services that are provided to us.
It's all jaded. So Barbara Comstock had a meeting with all the software companies, science and technologies back in 2016, and what she was saying.
One second, we're gonna get you to repeat that. So you,
Because we're taping this.
yeah,
You're a star.
We're invading your.
So Barbara Comstock had a meeting with the research and development, all the software companies were on the Hill. The vice president from Symantec says, we can't protect what we can't see. Semantics. They fight
Right.
viruses.
Right.
Okay? Earlier, you just mentioned about encryption. Encryption is only good for disclosure. It doesn't stop reformatting, deleting of information.
Right.
So we are jaded for the type of solutions that we want to protect.
Okay.
The VMware vice president at the same meeting says once the actor gets past the firewall, they can run around in your
Right.
network.
Right.
That's amazing.
Yeah. But, and I'd like to
And
get,
there's a solution to protect that.
there is a solution.
Yes.
So stop trying to protect everything, and
No.
let's focus on what is critical, and let's protect that.
Right, well, we can do that. There's a company called Green Tech.
Yes.
Did we talk to you down with John Marshall down in
Okay,
Norfolk?
yes, yes,
Okay, and there's a device that we have that stops,
Okay.
not prevents, stops ransomware attacks.
okay.
It's called a worm disk. Okay?
Okay, and we're going to get into solutions
I'm just letting you know.
at the end.
No, I'm just letting you know.
Okay.
Because we keep
Right.
talking, I've been to a lot of these meetings. But
Right.
we keep talking about the same thing and looking at the progression of cyber attacks.
Right,
That's because we do the same thing.
right. I'm providing context. That's very helpful. Thank you. Okay. So all of this got me thinking. Remember that old thing of expectation of privacy? You know, that there actually, our current precedence is based on realistic expectation of privacy, okay? And what that meant was, there are two pieces to it. And one of them is the wiretapping, so in other words, probable cause, okay? That you would have an expectation of privacy, and I'll explain the second piece in a minute. You would have an expectation of privacy for your phone records, okay? But if law enforcement has probable cause, right, that you're cavorting with criminals, you killed somebody, whatever, then they can subpoena those records, right, and get those records and use them in a case, okay? the two pieces are, as a part of that statute that still stands, is I need to expect that I have privacy, and you as a whole need to agree with me, right? So for instance, if I'm having a conversation on a phone that I own in my car, right, and no one else is around me, I would expect that I have privacy. And you would probably agree with me that I have privacy, okay? If I'm on the phone and I'm on a street corner and I'm, and I've got it on speaker, okay, and I'm having a loud, and I've seen it, I'm having a loud conversation, right? And, even if you think you have an expectation of privacy, society as a whole is not going to buy that. And so then it's not going to work, okay? So let's walk that line. What what started getting me going on this was about 2 years ago when we kept having the discussions of security versus privacy. And you could do it all day. Yes, inherently I would love to protect everything that we want to keep personal, okay? But is it realistic if there's a lot of things that I'm doing openly online? Okay, is it realistic that open communications online is going to be private? Okay. And then on the security side, if we give all of the advantages to the bad guys, they already have tremendous advantages, right? They have no rules. And as we discussed before, it's easy to be anonymous, okay? And we've made it easy for them to rob online and commit fraud. So how do we get to what some people call is a balance, and I don't. Okay, so this is where we get a little interactive. So is there anyone who feels that their work emails, okay? You know how it works, no pun intended. If your employer owns the platform, whether it's your phone or your iPad or your laptop, right, then you have no expectation of privacy. Those emails, those communications are either the government's or the companies or the organizations. That's how it works. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
Although DOD does have a lot of that.
Do they?
Yeah.
Do they? What do they say?
That they give, DOD has privacy banners on all of their computers saying that you don't have an expectation of privacy other than your privileges, doctor, patient, attorney,
Oh, I see.
that
The
sort of thing. 'Cause those are-
normal professional privileges.
Yeah.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
They save that for their folks overseas.
And I think that's a really good policy, right? I'm not sure every company has that policy because it's a policy, right? Social media postings. Okay, I've already gone on my diatribe on that, but honestly, there should be no expectation of privacy about social media postings. And then searching and shopping online. So your cookies that we all leave everywhere so that they can target you with advertising, those, no expectation. Blogging, it's kind of, even if you have it in so your own sharing, right? Not. And communications, in other words, this starts getting into the probable cause thing, but if you're communicating with a known bad guy, right, then there has to be probable cause, but you should realize that those communications are at risk, right? So then very quickly, the ones where I say yes. Are there other things that I'm not thinking of that we're doing online or we're doing in the wireless environment that I haven't captured? Because I'm always trying to make sure that I'm being comprehensive. So you think about that. Health. So I put personal medical, but it's probably a broader category. So yes. So what I'm getting to is, let's stop trying to protect the difficult. that really, should we have an expectation of privacy for those? And then let's dig into these, into each of these, the aspects of each of them. In other words, maybe it's not all medical information. What type of medical information? Okay, let's narrow that down. So right now there are HIPAA policies, right? But there are no consistent frameworks to help medical offices put those protections in place practically and affordably, right? It's more like, you need to do these things. And then they're kind of like, okay, so how do I make that happen? So I believe that there should be much more of a conversation, both from the technical community, the policy side of things, the professional industries, right? Need to be going into the next level. And I tell you, law firms are the worst. I mean, and I know this from experience, they aren't IT smart, okay? They're doing things the way they did them 20 years ago. And their client information or their case information or that private information is continuously at risk, and very inconsistent approaches. The American Bar Association has done some good things by putting a cybersecurity handbook in place and trying to promote it, but I actually blame it on my generation. Most of the law firms are in charge, the leading partners are my age, and they're in denial completely. Okay.
Most of those decisions on law firms are left up to the paralegal. The reason why
Yes.
is because they're trying to get information just processed rather than looking at it being prevented.
It's also in the hands, a lot of times, of the administrative assistants.
Yeah.
Okay, so another thing, in addition to really digging into what we need to protect, in other words, creating tiers of information and then zones of how to protect those, it's a risk management approach, right? In the national security arena, the way you feel is, everybody's trying to kill us and I have few resources. So how do I, right, prioritize what is most critical to me and protect that first? So for instance, let's go with the law firm. So for a law firm, their client information is critical. So then what are the document transfer software protocols that they can put in place? What are the sensitive files, right? How do they triage their client information? How do they store it differently? How do they limit access to that information so that everyone in the law firm doesn't have the same access? So in other words, you start going down that logic train, okay? What I would like us, and this is going on, right? I first got into the whole blockchain idea at least 6 or 7 years ago, is if we start really categorizing what is the data that we need to protect the most, okay? There are technologies today, one was mentioned earlier, there's quite a few technologies that are out there, but what it takes is a consistent policy, potentially statute, right, to put in place what is the technological approach, how does it work, how do I establish end-to-end trust, and why is end-to-end trust so important on the internet today? When people ask me, what I'm most afraid of, like, well, what's the cyber 911? The cyber 911, to me, is not the cyber war. The cyber 911, to me, is loss of trust online. Because right now, our global economy, right, moves through the digital world. And if we don't have trust in our financial transactions, if we don't have trust in the online banking system, across communications across companies, then, I mean, what do we do today regarding our economies other than physical work that doesn't involve this world? So I am less interested in, as a matter of fact, I'd like to see traditional cybersecurity approaches go out of business. And what we need to do is be creating and focusing on innovation on those new technologies that are more about, okay, what I tell a lot of small and mid-sized businesses, back everything up regularly. And what is truly unique, that if it were disrupted or destroyed or stolen, would bring your company to its knees. You wouldn't be able to operate through it, okay? And figuring out, and with each business sector, there are different jewels, right, of that company. And if you start there, and then you back everything else up, you can usually operate through an event. So even if you're hit, okay, it won't ruin your reputation, and it won't ruin your revenue. It might cost you some money, it might cost you some time, but right now, 60% of all small businesses that have a major breach are out of business within 90 days. And it's happening in an insidious way so that we're not aware of it. We're not living it. We're not understanding that it's actually going on. So I'm very supportive of both government and industry and the R&D universities focusing on the next generation technologies. Some of the initiatives are building trusted systems from untrusted components, right? Creating end-to-end trust, using some of the methodologies that the criminals are using today, but turning them into a commodity and a technology that everybody can use. So for instance, one of the things that they are doing in several countries in Europe is they do have a biometric identity card. Now that scares a ton of people, but with some of the technologies today, you encrypt the biometrics, and when it's not connected to you, it doesn't work, okay? So in other words, working advancements in that space so that you can prove that you are who you are, and you can establish that end-to-end trust when you file your taxes. 20% of all online filings today are fraudulent, okay? So, and what we're trying to do is, in government, is we're trying to implement technologies from 5 to 10 years ago, as opposed to piloting and skip echeloning to the new methodologies, so that we can create that new wonderful environment for us. So the way that I look at things today is it's the western town. There's no sheriff, it's before the law has arrived. A lot of good people are there, but only the bad guys have guns. And so it's truly, in a way, it's the wild, wild west today. And it doesn't have to be that way. There's a great deal that we can do about it. So let's circle back to privacy. Let's have a reasonable expectation of privacy. Let's not say everything associated with me in the digital world has to be protected, because then what's happening is we're failing at everything, right? If you try to do it all, then nothing. We have to prioritize about what are the data sets about us, about our companies, about our government that are most critical. Focus on them. So put the priorities in place, put a risk framework in place. I've done this with agencies and I've done this with small businesses. And what's amazing is you don't spend a ton of money because you're not trying to do everything, right? You spend a little bit of money, and it's kind of, I like to use the analogy of your house. You know, if you just lock the windows and doors, and we've seen it, right? Bad guys go when they try to open your door, and if they can't open your door, they go to the next door. I hate to say it, but it's actually that simple. If you're a small or mid-sized business and a low-level criminal tries to, get in through phishing, through ransomware, but you have prioritized, you have trained you've done the basics, right? They won't get into you, and then they'll go to the next one. So in my perfect world, right now, all of us are so far down. And if we just do the basics, think about it with driving. What do you need today? In the beginning, when automobiles were first established, right? I mean, rocky roads, no signs, no seat belts, no driver's ed, no laws, right, about anything. It's kind of where we are in the digital age. Is the capability is there, but the rules of the road haven't caught up. And I think the biggest thing before we fully open it up is each of us is actually responsible, okay? It wasn't until citizens said, we're losing, and I don't know how many thousand people on the highways every year because we don't have speeding limits. And we're losing this many on the every year because we don't have seat belts. And you see what I'm saying? It was consumer groups that built the bow wave that brought us to not a perfect place, but a much better place. And we need that bow wave to happen, but part of it is we need to set our expectations of what we can protect. And what is not reasonable to protect. I hope that makes sense for everybody, and thank you for listening. Questions? Thoughts? Don't agree? I forgot something.
Here we go, wait for the mic.
Thank you. If you could design a policy that Congress would pass, what would be the key features of that policy?
Yeah, so great question. So I think that what we try to do is put too much into one bill. I think there's one thing we could all agree on is training and education. And so I have a whole approach to digital literacy in our schools. So getting together some legislation that puts in place a consistent program across the United States. The materials and the curriculum is there so that it's about preschool and grade school. And it's not about scariness. It's about how do you optimize your ability to leverage the digital world. So it's doing it, using devices smartly, knowing how they work, having a little technical grounding, and not all the, stop, think, connect, not all cybersecurity. It's really about how do I take advantage and how am I successful? And then things like software programming camps, high school counselors that actually know how to talk to kids about great middle-class jobs that all you have to do is get a certification after high school. The ability for us to be trained and educated and successful in this world, to me, that's something both parties could get behind. And if the more we're educated about this space, the easier it will be. Because right now, the majority of us really don't know how it all works. So we're not fully informed, and we know how to use it, but we don't know what it means. We don't know what it's about. So that's the first one that I would do.
Follow-up?
I can see the long-range benefits of that,
Mm-hmm.
but what I see as a problem for consumers, we
Yes.
have this small packet of vital information that everybody has access to facilitate a transaction with us. That gets breached. I think
Mm-hmm. Right.
the current legal standard is you have to show actual damages from a
Right.
breach for consumers to be compensated, but those
Right.
actual damages might be incurred over many years. They might not
Right.
be visible at the time someone's contemplating bringing
Okay.
action. What do we
Okay.
do to better incentivize firms to prevent those damages
Right.
occurring to
I
us, the
believe,
consumers?
so it's a great point. I believe in opt-in programs. Some of the technologies that I discussed, you can have opt-in programs with government, you can have opt-in programs with financial institutions, I would be the first to sign up to that next generation technology that allows me, but maybe I'm giving, I have encrypted biometrics, or maybe I'm using blockchain and I have to learn about it. Do you see what I'm saying? I would love to be able to do, I don't think we can edict it. I think we have to do the opt-in programs so that then people get the experience with it and then it spreads. And that's kind of what they've done in Europe in a bunch of places. I think it's people getting comfortable with a different methodology, a different technology, a different process, and then being able to get there. Right now, we're over here, and we want to get over here, and it's hard to move fast. So I think for government, it's those areas that I said. I think each of the committees, each of the industry areas, it has to be a partnership between industry and government, needs to get to the next level. So they're having the discussion, but they're not talking about how to set a real process in place based on a policy framework and then leveraging the technologies. It's that next level down. I know you want me to make it easy.
This is a little different. It was interesting. I was trying to track down someone for a totally different program, a woman who's written a book about stealing the secrets of tea growing in China in the centuries ago. And I couldn't figure out where she was. And I was trying to reach her on Twitter, just saying, I want to have you come and speak, but not if you're in Germany. And I thought, I think she's in New York. And so finally I got a hold of her through Twitter, and she's like, oh yeah, I use Twitter as my home base, or Germany as my home base for Twitter, because Germany has such stricter privacy laws than we do. So by having her location set as Germany, the trolls cannot be as nasty with her.
Right.
I was fascinated.
The problem in the GDPR, the new legislation in Europe, the problem is that it comes out to say, this is what I want to be private, but it's not technically grounded. And so the difficulty of then continuing an open internet, right? We've always been about, we want free reign of information. And so that's why I want to promote the free reign of information, but then protect what is most critical. And I think starting with your personal financial information is a great way to start, because it's so integral to your identity. And actually, it is the bank, the financial institutions that control a lot of that. And then if the government would reciprocate using the same credentials when you file your taxes, you see, it eventually could get to an identity card, identity chip, identity mechanism that people worry about, So that's the flip side of it. That's why I'd make it opt-in.
I'm sorry, I'm hogging all the questions, but I'm
Oh, I
holding the
think
mic.
this gentleman did have one. And
Okay.
then we'll slip back to you.
Okay.
How's that, Amanda?
That sounds good.
Okay. Besides, I
Oh,
like
you-
Ellicott City.
You mentioned that certain percentage of small businesses, when hacked, then go out of business. Why?
So if they communicate with their customers via email and they lose 2 months worth of their email, sometimes they can't regroup. It's basically all their records, all their interactions, all their orders. I spoke to a small manufacturer in Cleveland. They lost their intellectual property for their manufacturing capability. Their computers were frozen because they didn't pay the ransomware, and they didn't get it back for a month. The ransomware payment killed them. It doesn't take much, having a small business. Your margin, right? You just don't have margin. And so if you lose a month's worth of productivity, or if you have to go inform all of your customers that you lost their data, trust factor. So I always say it's revenue and reputation, right? It's that.
My only thought is that the problem here is exactly the same as being hacked, as being careless and dropping your cup of coffee on your
Right, laptop.
laptop. So I mean, it's protection of data, not protection from folks coming in from the outside. Because you have
Right.
backups.
Oh, no, stupidity can be, can be a showstopper
Yeah.
too. But if you think about, because a lot of people ask me about backing up to the cloud. And I said, if it's data like photos, right, back it up to the cloud, as long as they're,
Not all your photos.
well, some of us don't have those photos, but you know what I mean. If it's something that is important to you and you just want to copy, but it's not, right, financial data or private communications that you want to protect, they'll do a better job of backing it up than you do. Now, I do both. Back up to the cloud, and then I have a hard disk, $80, plug it into my laptop, back it up about once a week, and then no matter what happens, right? Now, I'm also one of those people is I don't write an email that can't be posted on the, billboard, because I just assume that all of my emails could be taken, and I write them that way. Those CEOs that wrote nasty things, I just think that, see, that's what I'm saying. Expectation of privacy, what are they thinking? I mean, it's just, hey, there are encrypted apps. CoolSpan's one of them. Put them on your phone, and you can do encrypted calls and encrypted texts with your friends. Then you have an expectation of privacy. Yes, ma'am. What was your other one? Anyone else?
So
Yes,
when you
sir.
talk about the cloud can be compromised.
Can we go to other people who haven't talked yet?
I just wanted to make a cloud comment.
Oh, okay.
It's a $1 billion business. Microsoft, Amazon, all of those have been compromised, okay?
Yes.
Google is at the bottom with $3 billion. It's a big business. You need a secure cloud.
Yes.
Secure cloud.
Well, for secure things, not for everything.
You still need a secure cloud.
Okay.
$18 billion. Amazon's
Okay.
$18 billion, and it still can be compromised.
Yes.
Let's get on that. No.
This gentleman, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So if your plan is essentially to encrypt a certain set of biometrics, that's only going to work as long as current encryption algorithms are valid, unless you
Absolutely.
plan on constantly re-encrypting them.
This is
So-
the world of security. We're always keeping up, and you have to keep up, so I agree.
Right. But this is a giant rollout. You're going to have a biometric encryption for everyone. And let's be conservative and assume we only have to do this every 15 years, that we're only going to be replacing our algorithms every 15 years.
Right.
That's still 300 plus million people that you have to get on board with this
Yeah.
system every 15 years.
Right. So we're losing 1 to 2% of our GNP every year. We're only growing 2 to 3% a year. I think it's worth the investment. So in other words, whatever it takes. Hey, Yale locks, right? Everybody have a Yale lock? You know, yes, people figured out how to break them, but most of them, right, it takes time to do it. And we have to keep up, right? So the lock mechanisms got more complex, and then you did the double locks, and yeah, it is a race. But right now, we're in total mission failure.
Okay.
Yes.
The whole idea, though, of that the expectation is that then you have all that buy-in is that we as a culture, as a community, as a group, you're constantly, those new people are buying into because we tell them that this is how we do it. I mean, I'm a teacher, so I was listening carefully to what you're talking about, digital literacy. And the reality is that right now, 7 and 8-year-olds are dictating how digital devices or how they're being used in a home. I know this for sure because it's time for my state test, and I've got kids who are playing Fortnite and have set up secret things on their parents' devices that they don't realize they're texting back and forth. Their parents receive texts, a copy of every text. I teach 5th grade. My 10-year-olds know exactly how to get around it so that their parents are not getting a copy of those texts. Now, we're setting the precedence. So every 15 years, yes, I understand like this cost is there, but when the expectation is there, the price to do that goes down. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I think that it is something to consider that the buy-in is always there, but as Americans in particular, I've lived overseas, we're terrified of the government. Mm-hmm. I went into my cell phone, you know, and changed my phone number when I was living in Denmark. Everything was changed, and it took me 3 months to overcome, like, oh my God, they just changed everything. I just went into the cell phone store. However, it was actually very convenient. So I do think that there is you have to shift that thinking and understand that the generations behind us are just like everything else, following our footsteps, good and bad. Mm-hmm. So,
and not always with the total insight that they need to make the right decisions.
Exactly, even as adults, right?
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to counter your comment about Americans being afraid of the government. And I have to say that as a government employee and kind of working in this arena, I feel that, you know, while George Orwell in his book 1984 had some, you know, important things to say, and, you know, Congress has reacted with all these laws like the Privacy Act and so forth, whatnot. Government is actually hamstrung by what it wants to do to American citizens, whereas the internet and all the tech companies like Facebook and Google and Amazon, they're the ones that we really should be scared of, and I don't think anyone is. It's like, hey, you can track me all you want. As long as you're trying to make a buck, it's okay. But, you know, and so I just think...
Precisely my point. I wasn't defending that belief. And anyway, that's what my point is that we're so afraid of the government, we're not willing to protect ourselves as consumers. And there's a lot better consumer protection in Europe. The consumer risks losing less, yet here we are, a country that thinks we are protecting everyone. So no, I'm not saying that I agree and that I'm afraid of the government. I, believe me, have more than exposed myself to many things, but yeah.
Well, and I will say that I don't think, and I'm going to put it on me, we in the national security community tell our story very effectively. So I remember at the peak of FISMA and the courts, right? And everybody was saying, well, I don't want the government, you know, reading my emails. And we were not explaining that, hey, think of a letter, okay? And on the outside of a letter is the address and the return, the to and the from, and the stamp and the date, time, and when it left, okay? That's what you're looking at when you're looking at the externals of internet traffic, okay? And so what you really are knowing is you're talking to him and he's talking to her and she's talking to him and he's a bad guy. And so then you have probable cause, and then you look at the internals, right? But we didn't have those conversations in the news, in the public, in the da-da-da-da. We don't explain very well what we do in the national security community and the line that we're always walking and the laws and checks and balances that are in place, and not that we're perfect, but just what it's about. And so then it's really bad. A lot of parts of the country, right, really do fear the government, and I put it back on us. Okay? You've got to be thirsty. Oh, sir, you did have your hand up earlier.
We've given up privacy for ease and convenience in today's
Yes.
society. We have
Yes.
lost, that battle is lost.
Yeah.
You can talk about what some of the other agencies are doing. I worked for OPM, but I didn't set internet, privacy policy or anything like that.
So
But
you're why the Chinese have my fingerprints?
I speak to I speak to the Chinese in my building and tell them that Xi Jinping shouldn't be interested in me at all. I'm the dullest person they know. And all they do is chuckle when I say things like that.
Yeah.
But you can talk about some of the other things agencies do. We just never gave out, don't say numbers on the telephone or something like that.
Right.
If you have something you want to say to us, you tell us what your checking account number is or your routing number is and what amount of money you're expecting, things like that. But the question I actually have is, why is it so difficult for some of these companies who seem to be aware of our every commercial move? Why can't they pick up on somebody like this shooter in Florida who on the internet said he was going to be a school shooter? It's completely unrelated to the topic tonight, but
So that takes them changing their business model, and we as consumers are the ones that can influence them the most. I mean, frankly, the backlash on Facebook, that was huge, but it needs to continue. In other words, I don't think the battle's over. If you look at, when we were driving in the 1920s, everybody would have said, oh my God, this driving thing, it's out of control, what's going on? We can still start to put smart things in place and protect the critical aspects of our privacy. What I don't want us to do is to try to protect everything that, that is unreasonable. That's all.
I think Zuckerberg just mesmerized the Congress. I don't think there's going to be any legal change whatsoever.
Yes, sir.
I would like to respond to what you said about the Florida shooter.
Okay.
So I feel like we have a lot of confirmation bias when we see the ads that like Facebook and Google and Amazon put up in front of us. Like you see one ad that you know is right for you and you think, oh my God, they know everything about me. But you'll also see like half a dozen ads that are clearly wrong. Like, for instance, Facebook thinks that my #1 interest is motherhood.
No, it is.
Now, that's fine. There's there's only the opportunity cost to them by being wrong about that, and there's no cost to me that I'm getting ads for diapers. But imagine if they incorrectly ping somebody as a school shooter. There was a student, I believe at the University of Maryland, who started buying 1 or 2 rifles, like long guns, and a sports car. And somebody thought that he was going to be a school shooter. His grades started dropping, and he got deported. Obviously, the assumption that he was a school shooter was not solely responsible for him being deported. There were other factors, but it did add up.
It's my recollection this guy in Florida did say something online about his wanting to.
Right.
Well, and again, there's probable cause to look. It's an indicator. It doesn't mean you arrest them. It means you look into it.
Right.
You inquire.
But think about how many people they might get wrong, how many people they might recommend to the FBI who maybe shouldn't be recommended.
Well, no, it should be handled on a state and local level.
But that's not the flow of Facebook. Facebook is supposed to be a community. So if somebody in his community circle says he's saying something wrong, that's when someone's supposed to stand up and say, hey, his behavior patterns are off. It's a community of people, and it's only big because we make it big. But if the 4 of us are in the same group and I say something wrong, then one of you have the responsibility to say, hey.
Unless we all agree.
Right.
Which is the big problem,
Right.
Because that's who the group
Right, right. That's the hole in it.
They reported it to the FBI, but
Yeah.
the FBI just dropped it.
Actually, the one I have, and I don't have a solution for it, was the whole Apple FBI thing. I'm always thinking that if it were the CEOs of Apple's son who was at risk to a future terrorist act, all of a sudden it would be critical. So that's what I talk about. We need to follow probable cause and the laws, right? But we also need to understand that whatever technology we put in place, the backdoor thing, whatever technology we're creating today can be broken tomorrow. It's been that way since literally the beginning of time. So to think that something is going to be impenetrable forever, I think is unrealistic. And especially in that particular case where it was the phone of a known terrorist who had already killed 14 people. Is there any more probable cause than that?
See, that's where you have to change your thinking, because the technology exists that prevents any type of compromise. See, the thing with our technology, people aren't open to new innovation. Green Tech has that. We have a device that prevents ransomware attacks and attacks on the master boot record. The technology exists. It's like that when we were growing up, remember Steve Austin, the $6 Million Man? Hey, the technology really exists. It exists.
Right.
We have to start looking at new technology.
Okay.
And the government is not open to that.
Okay.
We've been to every meeting. NIST has written a new standard for data integrity around our device, 1800-11. That's unheard of. And we're a small company.
Right.
DISA has approved
Okay.
it.
Any new questions or new people? New people. I just want to make sure everybody gets heard.
Yeah.
So for small businesses
Yes.
on social media, you have to build that footprint to get
Absolutely.
the customers. So how would because I've been, working for a year to build our footprint.
No, doing it with
How do you-
business, I think you're good. I think you're good. It's when you start divulging too much personal information, or hey, we're all having a picnic
Right.
tomorrow over in Maryland, and my business is in Virginia. It's more of that. You just have a little healthy paranoia of the kind of information that you're putting out there. But promoting your business and promoting what you're doing with your customers is all good. Putting pictures of, young children and where they live and where they go to play every day and that there's a birthday party at grandma's and she doesn't have a fence, doing things like that. You just have to put a little bit of that bad guy,
Right.
in your head.
Without getting too paranoid.
Right. I always say I'm ever watchful, but it doesn't keep me from doing anything. Right? You're thinking a little bit, okay? A little bit defensive, okay? But not paranoid. Yes, sir.
How soon do you see quantum decryption becoming a major threat?
When I was at CMU, obviously there was amazing work going on there. I just don't see it progressing at the level that I thought it would. I think there needs to be a breakthrough. And I think that, that kind of scientific breakthrough can happen at any moment.
I keep reading that it's going to come soon.
Right. So the good news is there's enough investment and efforts internationally that it could, and enough competition. So I think that's all good. Hey, and anything that can help solve problems, right? Okay. Yes, ma'am. You're getting your workout.
If I may go slightly off topic, I'm intrigued by your background in naval intelligence.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a family member who's a naval intelligence officer.
Okay.
All he can tell me about his job is that he can't tell me anything about his job. So I was wondering if you could give me some general how
Sure.
naval intelligence has
Yes.
worked in the past, what it does now, just, and how it fits into this whole
Yeah.
cyber privacy world.
Yep. So the way to think about the intelligence community, right, is about knowing about the bad guys. And there are a lot of them, okay? And then we divvy it up in specialty, okay, according to the departments that we're associated with, okay? And then we have some agencies that do certain functions on behalf of the entire community and the entire US government. So naval intelligence is about protecting the operation and enabling the operations of the US Navy, okay? And sometimes the Marine Corps, and sometimes the Coast Guard. But it's really about their operations, what are they doing? If it's a peacetime environment, how do we keep them safe in a peacetime environment with terrorism or whatever, okay? And then who are the bad guys that we just need to track their military capabilities, right? So the big guys out there who we know are okay with us today but may not be okay with us tomorrow, we need to know about their capabilities, their operations, because if we ever have to meet them in a crisis or at war, we need to be able to beat them, okay? But there's also a very positive part of it, which is just knowing the world and enabling partnership around the world. So there's a lot of partnership across the navies globally, and some of that is information sharing that we do as intelligence professionals. But it's basically planning, exercising, and sometimes actually, right, conducting operations. The cyber part of it is, I think, we're the best in the world in the Navy side. And the reason I think that's true is because we have lived in a virtual world at sea, okay, for 100 years or more. So we've depended upon everything from a sextant, right, to then sonar and radar, and showing those in virtual screens and ELINT, and signals intelligence, and basically operating and interacting just based on what we know from those sensors in a virtual world. So it was natural for us to then go from the electromagnetic spectrum world into the cyber domain, and we're very comfortable there, and we're very effective there. We also deploy all the time. So we're always at sea, we're on the sea, we're under the sea, we're in the air, we're in the littoral, right? So we have a very multi-spatial, sense about us. And when you look at a lot of the leaders, both in government and outside of government, a lot of them are former naval intelligence professionals. Hopefully. So it's your son? A family member? Lucky person. It's an amazing career, and what's really cool, it prepares you for anything. Anything. You can be successful in anything after, and you don't have to stay the whole career, Okay, you've been amazing. Thank you so much.
Terry, thank you. You're wonderful.
Yay.
Thank you, Nip. We always love partners.